The day I had imagined would be one of the happiest of my life was fast approaching, yet a tiny, nagging sense of unease kept creeping into my mind. I'm 22 years old, preparing to marry the person I trusted and loved the most, him. 25, the man I had thought would walk beside me for the rest of my life. We met back in college, and from the very beginning, he was warm, considerate, attentive, always making sure I felt heard and appreciated. I had believed that love was something lasting, something unshakable, and that our upcoming wedding would be proof of all my dreams coming true. Every morning, I'd wake up and look in the mirror, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. I'd brush my long hair, glance at my eyes, catching the light, and smile, picturing myself walking down the aisle in a pristine white dress, holding the hand of the person I loved, surrounded by the warm glow of the ceremony hall and the smiles of our families and friends. I whispered to myself that this was the moment any girl would dream of, and I felt lucky to be living it. Yet, beneath that joy, a quiet anxiety lingered. Not because I doubted his love, but because there were parts of his family's traditions I didn't fully understand. He had grown up in a strict household, where traditions sometimes stretched beyond what seemed reasonable. At first, I thought I could navigate it, be flexible, and everything would be fine. But now, subtle hints of family expectations started to creep in, and I felt that small twinge of fear, though I tried not to let it show. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of planning, trying on dresses, designing invitations, arranging the reception, and juggling a million tiny details that every bride knows too well. My friends called and texted constantly, asking how I was feeling about the big day. I'd smile, tell them I was excited, that everything was falling into place. But inside, I kept a little corner of worry to myself, thoughts I hadn't dared to share with anyone, not even him. One evening, he took me out for dinner to finalize some wedding details. We sat together in a small, cozy restaurant, the soft golden light reflecting in his eyes. I felt warmth and love, and in that moment, I believed nothing could break us. He smiled, held my hand, and told me everything would be perfect, that I was the most important person in his life. I smiled back, trying to believe him completely, and then, in what felt like the calmest, most perfect moment, he dropped a bomb I could never have imagined, a tradition his family insisted upon, one involving a virginity check before marriage. I froze. I remember every word he said, the casual tone that made it even worse. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and a cold wave of dread ran down my spine. The thought of standing in front of every male member of his family and having my body scrutinized was horrifying. And the worst part, he acted like it was completely normal, something I had to accept. The days that followed, the pressure grew. Every interaction with him felt heavy, each conversation laced with subtle reminders of the tradition. My internal storm of emotions intensified. Fear, confusion, disbelief, and slowly, anger. I asked myself over and over, should I comply to keep the peace and ensure the wedding goes smoothly, or protect my own dignity and autonomy? Nights became restless. I lost my appetite, struggled to sleep, and the joy I had once felt in these preparations started to fade. My friends began to notice a change in me. One afternoon, while trying on dresses with my best friend, I broke down and shared a small part of what was going on, still hesitant to mention the full tradition. She took my hands in hers, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "If this scares you, if it makes you uncomfortable, you have every right to say no." No one can force you to do something that crosses your boundaries. Her words were like a tiny beam of light cutting through the darkness in my mind, reminding me I wasn't alone and that I still had control over my own life. But I had no idea what was coming next. I had no way of knowing that in just a few days, I would face a nightmare more unimaginable than anything I'd ever pictured. That my fiancé, the person I trusted the most, would put me in a position where a single decision could change the course of my entire life. I couldn't foresee the fear, the emotional and physical pressure, or the sheer tension I was about to encounter, and in that seemingly peaceful moment, a part of me began to wonder, is the love I trust strong enough to withstand family traditions and unreasonable demands? Do I have the strength to protect myself against emotional and physical coercion? All these questions hung in the air like dark clouds, warning me of the storm to come. I looked out the window at the fading sunlight and whispered to myself, I have to find the answer. I have to be strong. And in that moment, I had no idea that this resolve would soon be put to the ultimate test, a test that would force me to choose between love, freedom, and my very sense of self. That day started like any other, but the moment I walked into the room where he was waiting, I felt a shift in the air. His familiar smile was there, but his eyes held something I couldn't quite place, and my heart started racing. I tried to smile back, exchanged some small talk, but a part of me couldn't stop asking, what am I about to face today? He started talking calmly, the same warm tone I was used to, trying to make sure I didn't feel pressured. I just want to finalize some things for the wedding so everything is perfect, he said. I nodded, hoping it would just be about dresses, flowers, or the guest list safe. Familiar topics, but then, as if flipping a switch, he brought up a family tradition I had never heard of. He explained it casually, his words slicing through me like ice. It was a ceremony to check the bride's virginity before the wedding, with all the males in his family present. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and a cold wave ran down my spine. I could hardly breathe. The thought of standing in front of all of them, being scrutinized, humiliated, felt unbearable. I sat there, frozen, eyes wide, struggling to process what I'd just heard. Thousands of thoughts raced through my mind. How can I possibly go through this? What will they think of me? How will I survive this moment? Fear spread through me like fire, but I couldn't move. It was like my legs had turned to stone, anchoring me to the floor. He continued, detailing the reasoning behind it, insisting it was about family, honor, and tradition. He said every bride in the family had done it, that it was mandatory, an essential part of the wedding. Hearing that fear mixed with anger, how could he treat me like some object, a proof of honor for his family? I wanted to scream, to shout that I wouldn't do it, but the words caught in my throat, and the fear quickly turned into pressure. When I tried to express my discomfort, he became irritated. His tone sharpened, no longer warm, commanding instead, "You don't understand. This isn't about feelings. It's tradition. You have to follow it. There's no choice." I felt my chest tighten, my heart thumping wildly. It was as if an invisible wall had closed around me, leaving no way out. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming, but deep down, a part of me started to rise. I knew I couldn't let myself be controlled like this. In the days that followed, I lived under constant tension. Every encounter with him felt heavy, every word and glance laced with subtle threats. I wrestled with the impossible. Could the love I trusted really protect me from this absurd tradition? I felt trapped between love and self-autonomy. I loved him, I trusted him, Yet I couldn't understand how he could put me in this situation. Isolation grew. I couldn't confide fully in my family for fear of being misunderstood or judged. My friends knew something was wrong, but I only shared fragments, trying not to worry them. In the loneliest moments, fear and helplessness consumed my felt, as though no one could truly understand what I was going through. One evening, I tried confronting him again. I stayed calm, carefully explaining my discomfort. He listened, but his eyes hardened, his voice cold. "You don't get it. This isn't optional. If you refuse, it will cause serious problems for the family and honor." My chest tightened further, and I felt a mix of panic and anger. I realized this wasn't just a choice anymore. It was coercion. One decision would define my future. I became increasingly anxious, barely eating, barely sleeping. I kept imagining the ceremony, all the males in his family watching, judging me. Humiliation, fear, and a sense of violation all collided inside me. I asked myself repeatedly, how can I get through this? Can I protect myself without destroying the relationship? These questions tormented me, stealing my peace night after night. I decided to gather information, to understand every detail. I asked him more about the ceremony, why it had to be public, and how brides before me had handled it. He was firm, unmoving, no exceptions, no flexibility. If I didn't comply, there would be consequences. Fear and outrage bubbled inside me. I realized that the choice I faced wasn't just difficult, it was life-changing. In those moments of solitude, I remembered my friend's words, "You have the right to say no. No one can force you to do something that crosses your boundaries." Their words were a small light in the darkness, a reminder that no matter how terrifying the situation, I still had control over my life, but I also knew the coming days would test me like never before. I was about to step into a storm of emotions, fear, anger, and pressure intertwined, building toward a confrontation I had never imagined. In a quiet moment, staring out the window at the fading sunlight, I whispered to myself, I have to be strong. I have to survive. That was the moment I started to steel myself for the challenge ahead, a challenge that would push me to my limits and change my life forever. After learning about the virginity ceremony, my everyday life suddenly felt shrouded in darkness. Every meeting with him, every message, every call once normal, now carried a weight I could hardly bear. I had to carefully measure every word, every gesture, afraid that a single misstep would upset him and trigger even more family pressure. One weekend evening, he told me to come with him to visit his parents and brother. At first, I thought it would be a routine visit before the wedding. But the moment I stepped through the door, I realized the family atmosphere had shifted. From the first glance, I felt the scrutiny. His father's eyes seemed to inspect everything about me, from the way I greeted them, my posture, to how I answered questions. His brother sat nearby, silent but sure-eyed, observing my every move. He introduced me to everyone, but soon the conversation shifted toward the virginity ceremony. A family member spoke firmly, emphasizing, "This tradition is very important. Our son only marries a bride who proves herself worthy." I froze, my heart pounding, trying to stay calm while waves of fear and humiliation washed over me. I wanted to disappear from that room, but the words got stuck in my throat. He looked at me with an intensity that felt like pressure pressing down from all sides. For the first time, I saw him not as the man I loved, but as someone rigid, unyielding, seemingly willing to force me into something I didn't want. A wave of disappointment swept over me. How could the person I trusted most be the source of such emotional pain? In the following days, the pressure didn't let up. Every call, every message repeated the same demand. I must comply with the ceremony. He no longer hid his frustration or disappointment when I hesitated or appeared unsure. His words became sharp, a constant reminder that everything must go according to plan, with no exceptions. I felt trapped in an invisible cage, where even a single act of resistance could set everything off balance. One evening, after arguing about my desire to refuse, he snapped. His voice was loud, tense, and for the first time, he used harsh, demeaning language. "You're embarrassing me. Do you think you get to decide? I've been too patient with you already." I sat there, frozen, chills running down my spine, feeling both scared and stunned. I didn't recognize the man I once loved. How could someone say these things, as if all the love we'd shared was just an illusion? In the days that followed, the emotional abuse escalated. He began monitoring every move, constant messages, phone calls, checking on my friends. I felt stripped of freedom, of personal space. This control left me exhausted, anxious, sometimes panicking. His family didn't let up either. On one visit to his parents' house, they asked probing, judgmental questions. "Are you really worthy of our son? Can you prove it?" Each question cut at my self-esteem. I wanted to resist, to say I couldn't accept this, but the isolation and emotional pressure forced me to remain silent, nodding just to get through the visit. Some might think I was exaggerating, but to me, every word, every glance was a form of psychological violence. I felt coerced to give up control over my body, my decisions, and even my trust in love. Each day, I felt myself being worn down, scared, angry, and unsure if I had the strength to stand up for myself. Yet, amid all this pressure, a part of me began to fight back. I told myself, I cannot let anyone control my body or my choices. I must protect myself. Determination started to grow like a small flame in the dark. I began documenting everything, exploring possible options from talking to him, seeking help from friends, to even considering walking away entirely. A moment that fully woke me up was when he shouted at me in fury, threatening, "If you don't do this, there will be no wedding. You know the consequences, right?" My heart sank. But at the same time, an unexpected strength surged within me. This fear was no longer passive, it demanded action. I realized that if I kept enduring, I would lose control and even my self-trust in the following days. I prepared myself mentally for the decision I had to make. I understood it would not be easy, that every action had to be calculated carefully, and that any reaction could make the situation worse. I focused on staying calm, observing every detail, and nurturing the determination. I would not let anyone, even the person I loved, force me to cross my boundaries. And in those moments, a feeling of both fear and fierce determination emerged. I knew what lay ahead would test every ounce of my mental strength and resilience. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I understood one thing clearly. I had to be ready. This was no longer a story about love or happiness. Had become a battle to preserve control over my body, my dignity, and my trust in myself. Staring out the window one gloomy afternoon, I whispered to myself, I have to be strong. No one gets to decide for me. From that moment, I began walking into a journey filled with trials where fear, emotional abuse, and family pressure would push me to my limits. but also awaken a strength inside me I never knew existed. That morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest unlike anything I'd ever felt. I knew that today's meeting with his family wouldn't be another indirect conversation or a veiled threat over the phone. I sensed deep down that this was the moment of reckoning, the point where every choice I had made so far led to a climax. And I had to stand up for myself. When I stepped into the room, the tension was palpable, almost suffocating. He was there, his face rigid, eyes cold and more determined than I'd ever seen. The family members were seated around, their sharp gazes piercing me from all sides. I tried to breathe deeply, steady myself, but my heart raced so fast I could hear it echo in my ears. He approached me, his voice firm and commanding. "Now is the time for you to prove yourself." There's no excuse to refuse. The weight of his expectation pressed down on my entire body. But simultaneously, a part of me, this latent strength I had never known, had began to rise. I understood that if I gave in now, I would lose everything: control over my own body, my dignity, and my self-trust. The conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. I spoke clearly and firmly. "I cannot do this. This goes beyond my boundaries, and I will not agree." My voice shook, not just from fear, but from the anger that had built up over weeks of pressure. He looked at me with fury, and for the first time, I saw him as someone completely unrecognizable. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a version willing to force me into compliance. The emotional abuse escalated rapidly. He yelled, insulted me, and for the first time, tried to physically coerce me, grabbing my arm, trying to pull me closer, to force me to obey. I stepped back, my chest tight with panic, yet my inner resolve grew stronger. I knew I had to act to protect myself. Looking around, I realized there was no one in the room truly on my side. The family pressure, their judgmental eyes, felt inescapable. But I also understood something crucial. I could not wait for anyone else to rescue me. I had to stand up for myself. I felt a surge of determination. No, I will not let anyone force me. In that moment, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke loudly and clearly. "I love the person I choose to marry, but I cannot endure this coercion. If this is the way you intend to handle the wedding, I cannot participate." My heart was racing, but at the same time, a strange sense of liberation washed over me, as if an immense weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The reaction from him and his family was immediate: shock, anger, shouting. Yet I stood my ground. I did not retreat. I did not cry. I simply remained firm. I realized that the greatest power in that room was not theirs, was my steadfastness and my decision to protect myself. The confrontation lasted hours, filled with rage, threatening glares, and relentless psychological pressure. I felt exhausted, on the verge of collapse, yet I stayed upright. And in a rare moment of silence, I realized something profound. I was no longer afraid in the way that forced compliance had instilled. I was in control of my choice. After the confrontation, I walked out of the room with steady steps. No one followed me. No one offered acknowledgement or apology. But I knew I had won the most important battle, the battle within myself. I understood that even if love was tested, even if relationships could fall apart, the control over my body and my dignity was mine alone. In the following days, I continued to face indirect threats from his family, but my mental state had strengthened. I had crossed the threshold of fear, had stood up against pressure and emotional abuse. Most importantly, I had learned a lesson no one else could teach. Real strength and freedom come from within, not from the approval or coercion of others. Looking back, I still feel the lingering fear when recalling every glance, every word, every moment. But I also feel pride in myself. I chose to stand up, to protect my body, my dignity, and and from that experience, I realized that while love and happiness can be tested, inner strength is the most enduring and unshakable force. I left his family's house, stepping into the open air, taking a deep breath. The afternoon sunlight fell on me, and I felt a newfound sense of freedom and relief I had never known. I knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but at least now, I had regained the most important thing, control over my own life. And that, for me, was far more valuable than any ceremony or expectation they could impose. Asterisk. After the intense confrontation with his family, and with him, I left that house feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. It was as if a storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape that was eerily quiet. The outside world went on as usual, but inside me, echoes of fear, tension, and emotional pain lingered, like the residual hum of a powerful thunderstorm. Each step I took felt heavy, as though I was carrying invisible chains forged by weeks of coercion and manipulation. The first few days were the hardest. The relief of having asserted myself was quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming loneliness. Without his support or any semblance of acknowledgement from his family, I had to learn to stand completely on my own. I felt like a ship cast adrift in uncharted waters, unsure of which direction to go. Each morning brought a surge of memories. The way his eyes had looked at me with judgment, the controlling tone in his voice, the silence of his family members as if they were silently passing judgment on every move I made. These memories were relentless, replaying in my mind and testing my resolve. Recovery, I realized, was not a linear process. It was not simply leaving him or walking away from the family. It was about reclaiming mental and emotional space that had been gradually eroded. I had to rebuild trust in myself, learn to listen to my instincts again, and gradually take back control of my life. I started seeking support from close friends, people I knew could truly listen without judgment. We talked for hours about everything: the fear, the humiliation, the intense pressure I had endured. For the first time in weeks, I felt a deep sense of relief. Speaking out loud helped release some of the weight I had been carrying. But more importantly, it reminded me that asking for help is not a weakness. Healing is not meant to be a solitary journey. Community and connection are vital parts of recovery. Alongside talking to friends, I began journaling daily. I wrote down every thought, every emotion, every vivid memory, from moments of fear to the flicker of pride I had felt when I stood my ground during that confrontation. Writing became both a sanctuary and a mirror. It allowed me to see patterns, understand my emotions more clearly, and recognize the inner strength that had carried me through those darkest moments. Slowly, I understood that my strength was not just about facing abuse head, but also about reflecting, learning, and reclaiming power from the experience itself. Another critical aspect of my recovery was setting boundaries, not just with him, but with everyone in my life. I realized that love should never demand the surrender of autonomy or personal integrity. Saying no firmly became a ritual of self-preservation. I learned to recognize red flags, to trust my instincts, and, most importantly, to honor my own values above external pressures. Forgiveness played a surprisingly important role, but not in the way one might expect. I didn't forgive him or his family for their behavior. Instead, I had to forgive myself for the fear I had felt, for the moments of doubt, for feeling powerless at times. I had to acknowledge that my emotions were valid and that the courage to act, even amidst fear, was what defined my strength. Each small decision to assert myself became a brick in rebuilding my self-confidence and self-respect. Over the following weeks, I began to notice subtle shifts in my everyday life. Small things: a morning coffee in my favorite cafe, a walk through a familiar park, a late-night conversation with a trusted friend became sources of quiet joy. Recovery was not an explosive transformation. It was a gradual, layered process of reclaiming personal space, rebuilding trust in myself, and learning that joy can exist again, even after trauma. Through it all, one lesson crystallized with clarity: control over your own body, your dignity, and your life decisions is non-negotiable. No one, neither a partner nor their family, has the right to coerce or manipulate you into violating your boundaries. Real strength is not measured by how much you endure to please others, but by how firmly you can protect your autonomy and uphold your personal values. Emotionally, I learned to accept fear and pain without letting them dictate my life. Fear, I realized, is a natural and necessary response to danger, but it only becomes destructive when it controls your choices. By facing it, analyzing it, and making decisions based on my principles, I reclaimed agency over my life. The sense of empowerment that came from this understanding was profound. It wasn't about eliminating fear, but about mastering it. As the weeks turned into months, I began to feel a renewed sense of identity. I was no longer the person who allowed herself to be coerced. I had transformed into someone who knew her worth, who could assert herself under pressure, and who could navigate relationships without losing herself. I learned that love is not about submission or compliance. It is about mutual respect, boundaries, and equality. Even now, when I recall the confrontation, I still feel a twinge of fear and a pang of sadness for the emotional toll it took. But alongside that fear is a deep pride. I stood firm. I preserved my autonomy. I reclaimed my dignity. And in doing so, I discovered a part of myself I never knew existed: as strength, resilience, and self-respect that no one can take away. My journey of recovery continues. Life still presents challenges, as it always does, but now I face them with a steady heart and unwavering self-belief. I carry with me an unshakable lesson: freedom and inner strength are our birthright, and no one can take them from us. Every decision I make now is filtered through that lens, ensuring that my life remains mine, guided by my values, and not dictated by the expectations or pressures of others. And in the quiet moments, when the world seems calm and the sunlight falls just right, I smile, not because the past is forgotten, but because I know, with absolute certainty, that I am capable of standing up for myself, protecting my boundaries, and living authentically. That, I realized, is the truest form of empowerment, and it is a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. After leaving his house and stepping away from his family, I thought I had escaped all the pressure. But freedom wasn't that simple. Word of the conflict between me and his family spread faster than I imagined, filtering through overlapping social circles and leaving me at the center of whispered rumors and judgmental glances. Every time I walked past a familiar coffee shop, I could feel eyes tracking me, Every encounter with acquaintances carried veiled comments that made my chest tighten. I realized that the consequences of this ordeal weren't confined to his family or him. They had spilled into the larger social sphere, turning everyday life into a subtle but constant test of my resilience. Those first days were the hardest. Relief from standing up for myself was quickly overshadowed by loneliness and confusion. I had believed that leaving a toxic environment would be enough, but I soon learned that recovery is far more complex. It's not just about escaping control. It's about reclaiming mental and emotional space and learning to live on my own terms despite outside pressures. To rebuild myself, I started focusing inward. I re-established healthy routines, morning walks in the park to clear my mind, reading books to nourish my thoughts, and journaling to process emotions and mark each step in my journey of recovery. Every small action became an affirmation. I was regaining control over my life, little by little. I learned to listen to my emotions without judgment. Fear was still present, but now it no longer dictated my choices. A critical part of this phase was addressing the people spreading rumors directly. Instead of avoiding them or remaining silent, I learned to communicate with clarity and calm assertiveness. I stood up for myself, clarified the truth, and protected my reputation without attacking anyone. These interactions not only alleviated some external pressure, but also reinforced my belief that I had the right to control my own story. At the same time, I began cultivating healthy relationships. I carefully chose friends who respected boundaries, listened without judgment, and offered support when needed. These people became my anchors, helping me maintain my composure, rebuild self-esteem, and feel that I wasn't alone on this journey of healing. One of the most difficult parts was confronting the emotional wounds left by my past relationship. I had loved and trusted him, believing he would be my safe haven, but the harsh truth was unavoidable. He was willing to coerce me and disregard my autonomy. The heartbreak and disappointment were intense. Yet I gradually realized that safeguarding my safety and autonomy was far more important than clinging to a toxic connection. I had to accept that not all love is right, and sometimes letting go is the strongest act of self-preservation. During this period, I also wrote letters, never to be sent, but for myself. I recounted the story, expressed my emotions, reflected on lessons learned, and reminded myself of the value of freedom and personal agency. Those pages became witnesses to the inner strength I had yet to recognize, and they allowed me to see my growth more clearly. Another turning point was facing the fear of the future. I wondered, could I love again? Could I trust someone without feeling anxious or insecure? Instead of avoiding these questions, I learned to confront them, to acknowledge my fear, and to understand that the past does not define the future. Resilience and self-agency are what allow us to move forward, without letting old wounds control our lives. In the following months, I engaged more in social activities, learned new skills, and focused on my career. I realized that self-empowerment isn't just about defending oneself from negativity. It's about creating positive opportunities and making choices that enhance life. Every decision, from small daily actions to major life choices, helped reinforce my independence and confidence. Through this whole process, one lesson became crystal clear. Inner strength isn't about never feeling fear, it's about standing firm and acting in alignment with your values, even when facing pressure, fear, or adversity. I learned that boundaries, bodily autonomy, dignity, and personal freedom are inviolable. and defending them is the most profound act of self-love. Gradually, I started feeling a sense of peace. Not because the external pressures vanished, but because I knew how to stand my ground in the face of them. Every day I devoted to myself became a testament to the inner strength, growth, and self-reliance I had cultivated through painful experiences. Finally, I realized that this journey of recovery isn't just personal, it's a story worth sharing. I want to tell it so others can find strength within themselves, to understand that no matter the challenges in love or relationships, maintaining autonomy and dignity is paramount. I move forward now with a new sense of conviction. No matter what life throws at me, I am strong enough to make my own choices, protect myself, and live authentically. And that, to me, is far more valuable than any approval or relationship with others. The first month after leaving him passed slowly, filled with reflection and quiet introspection. I had grown accustomed to taking care of myself, rebuilding healthy routines, and finding small moments of joy in everyday life. But that peace didn't last. One evening, I received a message from him. "We need to talk. Just once. Please meet me." My heart raced, not with fear this time, but with a mix of caution, curiosity, and a lingering anger I hadn't fully confronted. I wondered why, after everything, he suddenly wanted to see me. I reminded myself countless times that I shouldn't go back, that I needed to protect myself. Yet a shadow of the past tugged at me in ways I couldn't ignore. I agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop, a place where I could leave at any moment if things turned uncomfortable. When he arrived, I realized a part of me was still hoping for an explanation, an apology, some acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. But alongside that hope, I sensed a newfound strength. I was no longer afraid, no longer emotionally dependent. I was in control and aware of it. The conversation began. He admitted to his past mistakes. His words carried regret, but I could sense a hint of calculation, as if he were trying to regain some measure of control. I listened without rushing to respond. For the first time, I realized the true climax wasn't about confronting him, it was about confronting myself. I had to choose between forgiveness and reopening my heart, or maintaining my boundaries and continuing down the path of self-empowerment I had worked so hard to build. No one else could make that choice for me. After a long silence, I spoke. "You can apologize, but it doesn't change the past. I've learned to protect myself, and I cannot go back to what I lost. We can end this here, clearly, so each of us can live our own lives." He stared at me, a mix of surprise, disappointment, and perhaps regret in his eyes. But I felt no confusion or weakness. I felt relief. I had stood my ground and chosen myself above all else. From that day forward, my life entered a new chapter. I continued to nurture healthy relationships, focus on my career, and slowly open myself up to new experiences. I learned how to enjoy happiness without relying on someone else, and how to cherish the peace I created for myself. This climax taught me a profound lesson. No one has the power to define your worth, your happiness, or your choices except you. Self-empowerment isn't easy. It requires courage, clarity, and the ability to face your deepest fears. But once achieved, it brings a sense of freedom and agency that nothing else can replace. Through this process, I also realized that trust in myself is the foundation for all future relationships. I no longer tolerated what hurt me, no longer gave in to unreasonable pressures. Instead, I learned to set standards for myself and others. respect my boundaries, and demand respect in return. One afternoon, while walking through the park where I often sought serenity, I recognized that all the pain, trials, and external pressures hadn't weakened me. They had forged me into a stronger, more resilient, and confident version of myself. I smiled, feeling the sunlight warm my face, knowing I was ready to face any new challenge with steadfast courage. This climax didn't just mark the end of an old chapter. It opened the door to new possibilities. I understood that every choice I made, every boundary I maintained, was a testament to my strength and self-determination. And most importantly, myself, my freedom, and my control over my life are non-negotiable. After meeting him and finally setting boundaries, I felt a strange kind of relief, not the kind that comes from a simple apology, but a deeper relief that comes from reclaiming control over your life and confronting the past without letting it dominate you. In the days that followed, I reflected on everything I had been through: the arguments, the pressures from his family, the whispered rumors, and the judgmental eyes from society. The first thing I realized was that my inner strength didn't come from confronting them directly or winning any debate. It came from the small, daily choices I made: walking away when I felt unsafe, maintaining boundaries without compromise, saying no to unreasonable demands, and nurturing myself instead of bending to others' will. Each of these decisions, no matter how small, reinforced my sense of autonomy and personal power. I began restructuring my life in entirely new ways. Work became an essential part of regaining confidence. I invested time and energy into projects I was passionate about, learned to say no to opportunities that didn't feel right, and savored every small victory. I realized that peace and happiness don't come from others, they come from your ability to take control and create the life you want. Healthy friendships played a crucial role in my recovery. I spent more time with people who genuinely cared, respected my boundaries, and offered support without judgment. Coffee dates, long walks, or even just simple conversations became sources of positive energy, reminding me that I deserved respect, care, and love. Of course, this journey wasn't without challenges. Sometimes old memories would resurface: the pressure-filled looks, the coercive tone, and the judgmental whispers, reminding me that the past had not entirely disappeared. But now, instead of fearing these moments, I learned to accept them as part of the process. I breathed deeply, acknowledged the pain without letting it control me, and moved forward with newfound confidence. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend who had witnessed some of my struggles. Sharing my story aloud helped me see it more clearly. I realized that inner strength doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means knowing when to accept support and when to stand firm alone. Gradually, I began to open myself to new experiences and even new romantic possibilities. But this time, the key difference was trust. I no longer placed my entire trust in someone else. I trusted myself first. I learned to recognize who genuinely respected my boundaries and values, who brought positivity into my life, and who could be a supportive partner without compromising who I am. One afternoon, walking through the park, sunlight warming my face, I realized how far I had come. I had endured pain, faced social pressures, survived a toxic relationship, and learned to stand firm against any challenge. Most importantly, I had learned to love myself truly, independently of anyone else's approval or affection. The most important lesson I learned was this: personal freedom, autonomy, and dignity are non-negotiable. They form the foundation for happiness and inner peace. Understanding this made external pressures seem small compared to the strength I had cultivated within myself. Every decision I made, every boundary I maintained, was proof of the self-agency I had built. Day by day, I realized that true peace doesn't come from the absence of challenges or hardship. It comes from standing firm, staying calm, and upholding your values no matter the external pressures. I had learned to accept fear without letting it dictate my actions, to enjoy happiness without relying on others, and to build a life that truly reflected my desires and values. Ending this chapter of my life, I felt a profound sense of completeness. I hadn't won against anyone else, had triumphed over myself, my fears, external pressures, and painful memories. I had discovered that real strength lies in choosing for yourself, protecting yourself, and living according to your own values. Looking ahead, I knew every step I took would be guided by confidence, courage, and self-determination. No one could take away the inner power I had built. I walked forward in the sunlight, breathed deeply, and smiled, peaceful, strong, and freer than I had ever been. Autumn was slowly giving way to the final weeks of the year, and golden leaves blanketed the sidewalks, reminding me that everything changes people, feelings, opportunities, and challenges alike. After months of healing, I had learned to stand strong, protect myself, and cherish my personal freedom. Yet, this journey wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase, full of opportunities, but also demanding a deeper resilience. In the first days of this new chapter, I spent a lot of time reflecting on myself. I wrote in my journal each morning, capturing my thoughts, emotions, and the small victories I had achieved. Each page reflected my growth, from moments of fear and weakness to times when I had dared to stand up, face my past, and rebuild my life. Writing wasn't just a release. It was a way to see my own inner strength and the autonomy I had cultivated. Alongside writing, I began challenging myself to explore new passions. I enrolled in creative classes, writing, photography, and online storytelling. At first, I hesitated, doubting my abilities or fearing rejection. But with each session, each small project, I realized that joy came not from perfection, but from the freedom to experiment and express myself authentically. Mistakes became lessons, and every small step forward was a testament to my growing self-reliance and confidence. I also started expanding my social circle. In the past, fear and painful memories had made me avoid meeting new people and expressing my true thoughts. Now, I sought out new groups and communities where people shared stories, experiences, and mutual support. I attended discussions, group coffee meets, and casual social events I never dared to try before. Every conversation, every laugh, every connection reinforced the truth that I deserved love, respect, and care. A major turning point came when I was invited to participate in a volunteer project supporting children and teenagers facing hardships. At first I hesitated, questioning whether I had the energy to help others while still healing myself. But I realized this was an opportunity to see life from a broader perspective, to share warmth, and to strengthen my own inner resilience. Working alongside these kids, witnessing their small victories and moments of joy, gave me a sense of purpose I had never experienced before. As time went on, I also reconnected with old friends who had witnessed some of my struggles. Sharing my story aloud helped me see it more clearly. I realized that inner strength doesn't mean isolating yourself. It's about balancing openness to support with the ability to stand firm alone when necessary. Another Turning point happened when I met someone special at a writing workshop. He wasn't like anyone I'd met before. He listened without judgment, cared without imposing, and encouraged me to pursue my passions. But this time, I didn't rush. I observed, recognized my boundaries, and asked myself, do I feel safe opening up to him? Would this relationship compromise my identity or freedom? The following weeks were a test of patience and self-awareness. I learned to love without dependency, to trust without losing myself, and to share without sacrificing my boundaries. Every day I practiced calm, deliberate observation, realizing that true strength and control over my life were the foundations for any meaningful, lasting relationship. During this period, I also learned how to deal with social and familial pressure. I no longer feared judgment or whispers. I confidently chose a life aligned with my values and desires. Every decision, large or small, was carefully considered, giving me a sense of empowerment and agency I had never known before. One weekend afternoon, walking along the tree-lined streets I often frequented, I paused, took a deep breath, and watched the golden leaves fall around me. I realized that the journey from pain, trauma, and loss to peace and self-sovereignty was not a straight path. It was winding, sometimes rough, like a forest trail, but leading to breathtaking vistas ahead. I smiled, feeling serenity fill my soul, knowing I was ready for any next step in life. In this extended chapter, I also spent time reflecting on the values I wanted to maintain: long-term independence, self-sovereignty, respect for myself, and the ability to pursue happiness on my own terms. I understood that my past struggles hadn't weakened me, had forged me into a more confident, resilient, and determined person. Every choice, every maintained boundary, was proof of my ability to rebuild myself and exercise self-control in ways I hadn't fully realized before. Winter had fully settled over the city, draping everything in a soft, silvery frost. The days had grown shorter, and a quiet chill seeped into every corner. The streets were lined with bare trees, their skeletal branches swaying slightly in the wind, while the smell of damp leaves and distant chimneys lingered in the air. As I walked through these familiar avenues, each step felt deliberate, each breath conscious. For the first time in many years, I felt an unwavering, deep sense of peace, not one given by anyone else, but cultivated from within. It was a serenity that had taken years to nurture, shaped by pain, reflection, and resilience. Looking back on the journey I had endured from heartbreak, family and societal pressures, and moments of overwhelming doubt, to finally standing on my own 2 feet, realized just how much I had grown. Every confrontation with fear, every decision to uphold boundaries, and every painstakingly small step forward had contributed to shaping the person I was now. Self-reliant, confident, and fiercely protective of my own value. I understood at last that true strength wasn't about conquering others or external circumstances. It was about mastering one's own fears, limitations, and emotional responses. Life, now, was brimming with possibilities. I continued pursuing my creative passions, writing, photography, and storytelling projects that had once felt daunting. Each day, I carved out time for self-care, nurturing healthy relationships and personal growth. I realized that real joy doesn't stem from seeking approval or validation from others, but from living authentically, in alignment with one's values, passions, and desires. The sense of agency I felt was intoxicating. It was both liberating and grounding at the same time. During this period, I encountered many new people, friends who shared my values, colleagues who inspired me, and even the tentative beginnings of new romantic connections. But this time was different. I no longer lost myself for anyone. I learned to love without dependency, to share without surrendering my boundaries, and to trust without relinquishing my autonomy. Every experience, whether it ended in success or disappointment, became an opportunity to reinforce my inner confidence and build a life in harmony with my true self. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend, someone who had quietly witnessed my struggles from afar. We spoke at length, and recounting my journey aloud made me realize how much strength lay not only in surviving hardship, but also in telling the story, allowing it to resonate with others. I understood that painful experiences, if processed thoughtfully, could become lessons not just for myself, but for anyone navigating similar struggles. How we choose to engage with our past, I realized, shapes the resilience and happiness of our future selves. Reflecting on the past no longer elicited anger or regret. Instead, I felt gratitude for the trials that strengthened me, for the pain that revealed my true worth, and for those who came and went, teaching me essential truths about what matters most. I had finally grasped that forgiveness isn't about absolving others. It's about liberating oneself, letting go of the chains of past hurts, and stepping forward into freedom and self-determination in the weeks that followed. I embarked on a long-cherished project, writing a book about my journey. This wasn't merely for self-healing, it was to inspire and guide anyone facing adversity. The process demanded courage, discipline, and the willingness to examine my life in its rawest, most vulnerable form. Every paragraph written was a reclamation of power. Every memory recounted an opportunity to transform pain into purpose. I realized that the very experiences that once held me captive could become the foundation for strength and inspiration. Parallel to this, I tentatively opened my heart to new possibilities in love. This time, I was cautious but not fearful. I did not rush, I did not surrender my sense of self, and I maintained a space where I could remain fully autonomous. Each step forward in this budding relationship was intentional, measured, and grounded in mutual respect. I came to understand that true love is not dependency, it's the choice to walk alongside someone while retaining one's own freedom, integrity, and self-respect. Winter afternoons became my sanctuary. I would stroll through parks, observing children playing gleefully in the snow, couples holding hands, and individuals quietly walking, lost in their own worlds. In these moments, I felt a profound connection to life itself. I had finally matured to a point where my happiness no longer hinged on external validation, and my sense of self was untouchable by judgment or expectation. I felt whole, peaceful, and prepared to meet the future with an open heart. This journey taught me invaluable lessons. Self-reliance forms the foundation of lasting happiness. No one can take away the power you cultivate within yourself. Maintaining boundaries protects your well-being and allows healthy relationships to flourish. Forgiveness and gratitude release your soul from the weight of the past, making space for growth and serenity. Continuous self-reinvention is essential for embracing new opportunities and crafting a life that aligns with your deepest desires. Armed with these lessons, I stepped into the new year with confidence, clarity, and a readiness to embrace whatever came my way. Each day became a canvas, an opportunity to learn, love, and evolve. I had learned that true power resides not in others, but in oneself, the person capable of creating their own narrative, defining their worth, and choosing their happiness. One crisp evening, as I gazed up at the pale winter sky, I inhaled the cold, invigorating air, feeling it fill my lungs and awaken every fiber of my being. A smile spread across my face. I knew that no matter the challenges life would present, I now possessed the inner strength to stand firm, protect myself, and move forward with trust in my own value. I was ready to face new experiences, equipped with courage and absolute freedom. This story doesn't end here. It closes the chapter of past hardships to open a new one, brimming with hope, opportunity, and inner strength. It is a reminder that we all have the right to shape our own lives, learn from what we've endured, and live fully according to the values we hold dear. Most importantly, genuine happiness is not handed to us, is forged through deliberate choices, steadfast boundaries, and conscious steps forward. With a serene heart, a clear mind, and unwavering spirit, I continue my journey, knowing that whatever path lies ahead belongs entirely to me. I move forward with freedom, faith, and the full power of my own inner strength. I am the author of my own story, and every day offers the chance to write a page filled with courage, love, and authenticity. As I watch the first snowflakes drift lazily from the sky, settling on the frozen branches and the streets below, I felt a profound gratitude. Gratitude for the trials that had once threatened to break me, for the moments of despair that taught me endurance, and for the unwavering truth that I am capable of shaping my own destiny. Life's beauty, I realized, is not in the absence of struggle, but in the resilience we develop and the wisdom we gain along the way. And so, with the winter sun casting long golden shadows over the streets, I walked on, fully present in every step. Each breath, each heartbeat, each small choice became a testament to the person I had become. I understood that while life is unpredictable, my response to it is mine to control. My journey, once marked by pain, fear, and uncertainty, had transformed into a path illuminated by strength, self, and freedom. This is the story of reclaiming one's power, honoring one's boundaries, and creating a life of fulfillment and joy. It is the story of learning to stand alone when necessary, to open one's heart when safe, and to embrace life in all its complexities with courage and grace. And most importantly, it is the story of realizing that happiness is not a destination. It is a practice cultivated daily through self-respect, mindful choices, and unwavering faith in one's own journey.